So today we're looking at a stack of research that covers this really specific, really explosive window of time.
A very short window.
Yeah, we're talking roughly 1890 to, what, 1910? Couple
Yeah.
of decades at most.
That's it.
And it's a period most people know by the visuals. You know, the swirling vines, the stained glass.
Those posters of women with that incredible flowing hair.
Exactly. Hair that looks like it has a life of its own. We are, of course, talking about Art Nouveau. But going through these sources, what really struck me isn't just the prettiness of the style. It's the aggression. This wasn't just a decorative trend. It was a revolution against the entire visual history of the 19th century.
It was absolutely a revolt. And
Yeah.
you really have to picture the context of the late 1800s to get why it happened.
Right.
The whole architectural world was just suffocating under what we call academic historicism.
Just basically a fancy way of saying they just copied old stuff.
Exactly. If you were an architect in 1880, you weren't designing anything new. You were kind of like a DJ, remixing old tracks. You want a bank.
Make it look like a Greek temple.
Right. You want a train station. Let's make it a Gothic cathedral.
And the sources describe these buildings as cold receptacles. I love that phrase. They were just copying and pasting these dead languages.
Yeah.
And that's the tension, right?
Yeah.
You have this rapidly industrializing world, steam engines, factories, steel all over the place. But the art is stuck, pretending it's the 15th century.
So this new generation comes along and says, enough. We need a new art for a new age.
Hence Art Nouveau.
But they didn't want to just iterate on the old stuff. They wanted to wipe the slate completely clean.
Total reset.
Yeah, they were searching for a modern language that just didn't rely on the past at all. But as you've probably noticed in the reading, the critics didn't exactly roll out the red carpet.
No, the insults were fantastic. I actually made a list.
Oh, this should be good.
In France, the critics called it style nuit, which I believe translates to noodle style.
Noodle style, okay.
And in Belgium, they called it paling steel or eel style. They just looked at these undulating organic lines and saw wiggling pasta.
It's funny now, but those insults, they actually get right to the heart of the philosophy. The critics were disturbed by the movement in these buildings.
Because buildings are supposed to be solid.
Supposed to be solid, static, heavy. Art Nouveau made them look like they were writhing, like they were growing and moving. That eel quality, that was the whole point. It was all about vitality.
And that's the first big pillar we need to break down, isn't it? This philosophy of vitality, or what the sources call abstract naturalism. Because I think the common misconception, and I've been guilty of this myself, is thinking Art Nouveau is just nature worship. You paint a lily on a vase and you call it a day.
Right, but it's so much deeper.
The research points to something way more scientific. They weren't trying to mirror nature. They were trying to biomimic it.
That is the crucial distinction. It's the difference between taking a photograph of a flower and taking an X-ray of it.
Okay, explain that.
Well, Hector Guimard, who is one of the French heavyweights of the movement, he used this great analogy about the sap of things.
The sap.
Yeah. He argued that if you want to design something true, you don't look at the flower sitting pretty in a vase. You look at the stem while it's still in the ground. You look at how the sap, the life force, pushes through the veins to fight against gravity.
So when you look at an Art Nouveau column or, say, a table leg, it's not just a stick with some decoration glued on top.
No, the leg itself is the form.
It's shaped like a stalk. It's thicker at the bottom. It thins out as it goes up, and it curves like it's actually straining under the weight of the table.
Exactly. It's representing the élan vital, the life force.
And that links back to the intellectual godfather of this whole thing, doesn't it?
Right.
This guy, Eugène Viollet-le-Duc.
Right, the rationalist theorist. He's the one who came up with that now famous phrase, function should define form.
It sounds very dry and modern, but for these artists, it was a total revelation.
It was. They looked around and realized that nature never makes anything purely for decoration. A leaf is shaped the way it is to catch sunlight. A bone is shaped the way it is to support muscle.
And crucially, nature never makes anything perfectly symmetrical. That was the other huge takeaway for
A
me.
huge one.
Guimard and his peers, they looked at forests and saw that nothing is parallel. Nothing is a perfect mirror image. So why were humans building all these square boxes with parallel lines?
They decided to reject symmetry because to them, symmetry was static, it was death, asymmetry was life.
Which brings us to the most famous tool they used to express that life, the line itself, specifically the whiplash.
The coup de fouet.
It sounds dangerous, and when you look at it, it kind of is. This motif just exploded onto the scene with a wall hanging by Hermann Obrist. It's called cyclamen.
Right, 1894.
And it depicted these flowers, but the stems weren't these gentle, pretty curves. They were violent, snapping shapes. The critics said it looked like the crack of a whip.
And Henry van de Velde, who was another massive figure in the movement, he had this theory that a line is a force.
That's such a modern idea.
It really is. A line isn't just a border between two colors. It represents a trajectory of energy. Think of a lightning bolt. That's a line of pure energy.
So the whiplash curve was their attempt to capture that sudden release of power, but frozen in time.
Precisely.
And that energy wasn't just in abstract lines. It completely changed how they depicted people, especially women. The Nouvelle Femme.
You can't talk about this era without talking about Alphonse Mucha and his posters.
No way. He basically took the advertising world, which was pretty text-heavy and, let's be honest, boring,
Very boring.
and he turned it into high art.
Mucha's women are so fascinating because they sort of bridge two worlds. They're idealized, almost like goddesses with these halos of flowers and intricate patterns.
But they also represented a modern, confident woman. They weren't the demure Victorian housewives hiding in a parlor.
No, they were out in the city, on the walls of Paris, staring right back at you.
But there's a flip side to that depiction, too. You have René Lalique, the master jeweler, and his work wasn't just about beauty. It was about metamorphosis.
Oh, yeah.
The source material highlights this piece, the Dragonfly Lady. It's a piece of jewelry that is half woman, half insect.
It's an incredible piece.
It's stunning, but it's also a little monstrous.
Well, that's the symbolist influence creeping in. Art Nouveau wasn't just about sunny days and pretty flowers. It was also dealing with the mystery of nature, the cycle of life and death.
Blurring a line between a woman and a dragonfly.
It speaks to that biological connection that we are all just organic matter, constantly changing forms. It was a complete rejection of the idea that humans are separate from and superior to nature.
Okay, so we've got the philosophy of the sap, we have the visual language of the whiplash, but where this movement really goes off the rails, in the best way possible, is when they apply all of this to architecture.
Yes.
This is where we went into that German concept, the Gesamtkunstwerk.
The total work of art. This was the holy grail for them.
And the idea here is that you just abolish the hierarchy between fine arts, painting, sculpture, and the applied arts.
So making chairs or forks.
Exactly. And the architect becomes the sort of dictator of taste. He designs the building, but he doesn't stop at the front door.
No, he designs the wallpaper to match the structure. Then he designs the carpet to match the wallpaper. Then the furniture, the light fixtures, the door handles.
Even the silverware.
Everything. The goal was to create this completely unified environment where every single object sings in the same key.
The Hotel Tassel in Brussels by Victor Horta, that's the prime example the sources cite as the founding act of the style.
It really is.
Walking into that stairwell must have been a trip. You have these exposed iron columns that branch out like trees.
And the mosaic lines on the floor mirror the curves of the ceiling. It's completely immersive. You aren't just looking at art, you're living inside of it.
Which creates a psychological effect, right?
Mm-hmm.
They believe that your environment shapes your mind.
Absolutely. So if you live in a disjointed, ugly home, it makes you disjointed. But if you live in a unified, harmonious, total work of art, it elevates your spirit.
But there's a very fine line between harmonious and just obsessive.
Uh-huh.
The Stocklit Palace in Vienna, designed by Joseph Hoffmann, this is where I think they just crossed right over it.
Oh, that's where they took it to the absolute extreme.
I mean, the story that stuck with me is that the design was so total, so complete, that they were terrified of anything disrupting the aesthetic. Madame Stockler famously had a dress designed specifically to match the living room decor.
Because if she wore, say, a plaid dress in that room, she would ruin the entire composition.
Can you imagine the pressure? Honey, I'm going to go sit in the living room.
Okay, go put on the living room dress.
It just shows the level of control they wanted. They were designing a whole lifestyle, not just a house.
And to get that level of custom design, they had to embrace new materials. This is the other side of the industrial coin. They hated the smog from the factories, but they loved the materials the factories produced.
Iron and glass.
Iron and glass became their new marble.
Which is such a paradox, right?
Okay.
Because iron was for bridges and train stations. It was considered ugly, industrial.
So utilitarian.
But architects like Guimard took cast iron, this heavy, rigid material, and twisted it until it looked like, and this is the phrase from the notes, nervous suppleness.
It's a perfect description. Look at his Paris metro
Oh,
entrances.
they're incredible.
Those are cast iron modules prefabricated in a factory, but they look like alien orchid stalks just growing right out of the pavement.
Hmm?
He used the industrial process to create something that looked entirely organic.
He made heavy iron look like it was vibrating with life.
Yeah.
And then there's the glass. Louis Comfort Tiffany in the U.S. completely reinvented what glass could do with his Favreal technique.
He wasn't just staining glass different colors, he was using metallic oxides to create iridescence.
He wanted to capture the quality of light on an oil slick or a peacock feather.
So it changes depending on where you're standing. Again, it's not a static color, it's a living surface.
And in jewelry, Lalique was doing the same thing by rejecting diamonds. He thought diamonds were boring.
It's just about monetary value, cold cash.
Right. He preferred opal, moonstone, horn, even ivory, because they had that milky, translucent quality that felt more biological.
More alive.
And we also have to talk about ceramics, because Antonio Gaudí in Spain was doing something completely wild.
With his Trencadis technique.
Yeah, he was basically taking the waste of the industrial age-broken tiles, smashed plates from factories, and reassembling them into these shimmering skins for his buildings.
It was recycling, way ahead of its time, but it was also a solution to a geometric problem.
How do you put a flat square tile on a curved, organic surface?
You can't. So Gaudi smashed them. It gave his buildings that texture of like dragon scales or reptile skin. It reflected light in this shattered, glittering way that a flat wall never could.
Now, we've been jumping around a bit geographically, but we should probably map this out, because Art Nouveau was a global phenomenon, but it had these very distinct local flavors.
Oh, very distinct. It wasn't all whiplash curves everywhere.
So if you start in Belgium and France with Horta and Guimard, that's the classic style.
That's the epicenter. It's very sinuous, very botanical. That's your eel style.
Okay, but then you cross the channel to Scotland, and it changes completely.
The Glasgow School. Charles Rennie Mackintosh?
And what's his style like?
Well, Glasgow was a gritty, industrial, shipbuilding city, and Mackintosh's style really reflects that. It's much more vertical, austere, kind of restrained.
Almost spooky.
It is a bit spooky. The curves are subtle, like the famous Glasgow rose, but the overall structure is very rectilinear. It's less about a wild forest and more about a controlled, misty atmosphere.
Okay, so then you swing over to Vienna with the secession movement. So Klimt, Hoffmann, Moser.
Vienna is really interesting because they started with those organic curves, but they evolved very quickly towards geometry. They basically stripped the leaves off the trees.
Whiplash disappears.
It's replaced by the grid. You see checkered patterns, squares, gold leaf. It's still opulent, but it's becoming much more mathematically precise.
And then, on the complete opposite end of that spectrum, Barcelona. Gaudí.
Gaudí is in a league of his own. While the Scots were cooling things down and the Viennese were straightening them out, Gaudí was melting them.
Melting them is a good word for it.
His version of modernism is hallucinogenic. His buildings have skeletons and skin. They feel like they're breathing. The Casa Batlló looks like it's made of bones and visceral tissue.
It's the organic philosophy taken to its absolute, almost terrifying limit.
Absolutely.
And finally, we have the American take with Louis Sullivan in Chicago. Building the first skyscrapers, these giant steel cages.
Right? Form follows function.
But he covers them in this terracotta vegetation.
He believed the tall office building should be proud and soaring, so he emphasized the verticality. But he used that organic ornamentation to give the steel frame a human scale. It was a kind of handshake between the machine age and nature.
So we have this incredible, diverse explosion of creativity. It's global, it's total, it's radically new. And then, almost as fast as it appeared, it vanished.
It was gone.
By 1914, it was effectively dead. And the sources point to World War I as the obvious culprit, but was it just the war?
The war was the final nail in the coffin for sure. It just shattered the optimism of that era. You can't really focus on beautiful, flowing vines when you have trench warfare and mechanized death.
Of course.
But honestly, the movement was already dying under its own weight. It was simply too expensive.
That Gesamtkunstwerk ideal, the hand-carved banisters, the custom dresses, the unique stained glass, that all relies on incredible craftsmanship.
And as labor costs rose, that level of detail became impossible for anyone but the ultra-rich. You know, they wanted to create an art for the people, a new language for the modern world.
But they ended up making luxury goods for millionaires.
It just wasn't sustainable.
But looking at the lineage, it wasn't a dead end. And this is the part that fascinates me. We usually think of modernism The Bauhaus, glass boxes, concrete, as the enemy of Art Nouveau.
As a complete rejection of it.
Yeah, but the sources argue that Art Nouveau was actually the bridge that got us there.
It absolutely was. Think back to Viollet-le-Duc and the rationalists. That core idea that function defines form, the rejection of historical clutter, the embrace of industrial materials like iron and glass.
All of those were picked up directly by Walter Gropius and the Bauhaus.
They just stripped away the decoration.
So the whiplash curve eventually got pulled tight into a straight line.
Precisely. And in the decorative arts, Art Nouveau morphed directly into Art Deco. You can see that transition happening in Vienna, the curves turning into step patterns and zigzags. So the DNA of the movement survived, even if the flowers withered.
And the ghost of the movement came roaring back in the 1960s. I was looking at the notes on the San Francisco psychedelic rock posters.
Oh, yeah, the Grateful Dead, Jefferson Airplane.
If you squint, they look exactly like Mucha posters on acid.
The flower power generation rediscovered Art Nouveau, and it makes perfect sense. Both movements were about rejecting a rigid, corporate, gray society.
In the 1890s, they were rejecting the gray, industrial Victorian world.
And in the 1960s, they were rejecting the man in the gray flannel suit of the 1950s. They saw those swirling, illegible, organic lines as a symbol of freedom and rebellion.
It's a great reminder that these visual styles aren't just aesthetic choices. They're reactions to the world around them.
History rhymes.
So where does that leave us today? I mean, we aren't building subway stations that look like beanstalks anymore, but I'd argue that the Gesamtkunstwerk ideal is more alive than ever.
How so?
I want to leave you, the listener, with a thought. Look at the device in your hand. An iPhone, maybe?
Or any piece of modern high-end tech.
And think about the obsession with unified design. The way the curve of the hardware matches the curve of the software icons. The way the packaging feels like part of the product itself. The way the ecosystem is designed so your watch talks to your phone, which talks to your car.
It's a seamless, total environment.
We tend to credit, Steve Jobs or Joni Ive with that philosophy, but really, that's Victor Horta. That's the Stalklet Palace. We are living in the total work of art that the Art Nouveau architects dreamed of. We've just swapped the cast iron for aluminum and the vines for pixels.
And hopefully we don't have to wear a specific dress to sit on the sofa while using it.
That remains to be seen.
Okay.
Thanks for diving deep with us.
Always a pleasure.